Hello everybody. Um, Today I'm going to continue with my series of videos on science fiction movies, and today I'm going to talk about the 1953 film Invaders from Mars. You can see that poster there. This is a movie that's had a lot of influence, especially on young people who watched this film in 1953, people like Steven Spielberg, Joe Dante, and a lot of people who later became filmmakers. Tobe Hooper remade this film, have cited this movie as one that left a big impact on them when they were young kids, and which is no coincidence because this movie has a kid, a young boy, as a protagonist, who was played by Jimmy Hunt, who plays David, about a 10, 11-year-old boy in this movie. And we start out with David. It's late at night. He's supposed to be asleep, and he's looking out the window with his telescope, and he gets so excited about what he sees, he wakes his parents up and shows them. So we get the early on, he's full of imagination and really interested in what's happening in the sky. And later on that night, too, he sees something else. He sees a flying saucer crash into the earth, actually kind of burrow itself into the earth. And he tells his parents about it, who don't really believe him, of course. They think, well, of course, this was just a dream, David, as they say. But his father works at the local plant, which is working on secret projects that have to do with building rockets. And his father that morning goes to check out the site, and when his father comes back home, he's a completely different person. He's not friendly, he's very mean, very, very short-tempered, and clearly he's not the same person anymore, okay? And as David goes out, he notices other adults too in the town are not acting like themselves. Even some other one kid, one little girl he encounters is acting different. And one thing they all share is they all have a mark on the back of their neck. Okay, so he goes to the police and tells them what's going on. Of course, the police don't really believe him or anything, and so but the kid is clearly terrified of what's happened. He is sent to a psychologist played by Helena Carter, who believes in his story and helps him out, helps out David. So eventually we start to learn that people in the military, people in law enforcement, people in authority positions have the mark on their neck, and they're not acting the way they should act. Okay, so eventually the authorities become wise to it. They start to believe his story, and we eventually go to the ship, and they realize that they're Martians, I guess. So they're Martians, and realize that their intentions are very hostile, and that they want to take over people. They are literally able to take over people. So then the movie becomes more of traditional alien invasion movie where the army around the area has to mobilize, and the film uses a lot of stock footage to fight the very powerful Martians. Okay, and we actually go inside the ship, and this one of the interesting things about the movie. It's very surreal. There's some very expressionistic sets in the film, especially when they're inside the spaceship. It has a very surreal look to it and things like that. But the entire visual style of the movie, it's in color, shot in a very unique looking color for the early 1950s, which adds to this surreal flavor to it. And like one example towards the end of the movie where David is kind of reliving what's happened over the past few days, and there's this montage that goes by in this kind of surreal type of way that's really effective. But But there's a lot of interesting shots in the movie. Even at the police station, you can tell the sets, it's low budget, you can tell, but even at the police station, it looks very strange inside. Like the hallways look longer than they should be. So the whole movie, in some ways, feels like a dream as you're watching it, and that it's from the perspective of a young child, which is interesting. As far as reading into the movie, I mean, clearly the Cold War weighs heavy on this movie with all the references to atomic power and things like that. I mean, looking at the Martians as possibly symbolizing a fear of communism, the subversive effect of communism, how it can not only infiltrate institutions, but also even the family itself, kind of change your parents. So that's a very, frightening thing, especially. And that's one way of looking at it, as this fear of the other, fear of communism, which is pretty common in science fiction at this time, and even the lead Martian is sort of like this disembodied head, which is kind of creepy. It's just who was apparently some kind of super genius, and the rest of the Martians are humanoids. I guess they're supposed to be green humanoids, but it is kind of creepy the way there's like this one mastermind who is kind of controlling everything and pulling all the strings. So once again, I can see in the early 1950s that would have been frightening for a child to see. And I know there's a YouTube video of John Sayles, the filmmaker, introduced this movie for a film festival, and he called it a funky, low-budget science fiction movie, and that's really the best way to describe the film, I think. And yeah, so there's the Cold War stuff. I think there's but also it's interesting. There is a psychologist in the movie, and there is, I think, an interesting sensitivity in the movie towards the child, which we don't always see a lot in movies, about recognizing the imaginations of a child and believing what a child says. So that's interesting in the movie and things like that. It's also kind of has that World War II aspect to it, where it's really the army that mobilizes and saves the day. So this belief in the army that will be able to help us. We've seen that in The Thing and some previous films as well. So yeah, I know there's been a recent 4K restoration of Invaders from Mars. I'm sure that looks fantastic, I'm sure. And I did read there's different versions of this movie. The American version is a little bit shorter, and the ending is a little different. And there was extra scenes were filmed for the release in Great Britain, so that version's a bit longer. And I don't believe I've watched that different version of it, but that is important to know as well. So yeah, and I did mention there was a remake. Tobe Hooper, famous director of horror science fiction movies, made this for Canon Films in 1986. I've watched that a few years ago, and I remember that one being a little bit more funnier, like leaning into comedy a little bit, but also being a little bit scarier, so as would be expected. So yeah, Invaders from Mars, definitely a movie that made a big impact of its time, and I think if you go revisit it, it's an interesting movie to watch. There's a lot going on in it. Just for the visual style alone, I think it's worth going back and checking this one out. So okay, I guess that's all. Thanks for watching, and I will talk to you later. Bye.